All politics is local. That, I believe, is the lesson from last night. And joining me now to discuss it all is Joe Szymanski of Elections Daily, who put on chaired an amazing election night watch party on Elections Daily's YouTube channel. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good to be back.
So let's break down what happened last night. There's still some, I think, a little bit of the vote still out last I checked, but Republicans swept the statewide offices, and they have their projected winners in last I checked 5 seats, and they are apparent winners in 2 other seats, which would give them a majority in the House of Delegates, about 52 to 48, meaning Republicans got a grand slam in Virginia last night.
Yeah, that's really the case, Jonathan. I don't think anyone expected, by any means of fortunes, that what happened last night was going to happen. Obviously, in the last 2-3 weeks running up, we knew that the momentum was on the Republican side. Just the momentum was there in the state, combined with President Joe Biden's lacking approval ratings. We knew the momentum was on their side. There were a lot of rumors that both Glenn Youngkin, that Glenn Youngkin could win. Maybe he could drag Winsome Sears over with him. Maybe he could get the House of Delegates with him. But in the end, Republicans got, it seems like all they wanted, like you mentioned, it does seem like there are 2 House of Delegate races that could maybe possibly be affected by the late mail-ins that are coming in. Most of the people I've talked to have told me that they do not expect that to be the case in either of those 2 races. That would be the 91st and the 85th. Those are the 2 that are really that are left to watch, both there in the Tidewater area. That could maybe be affected, but most people expect us to be where we are right now with a 52-48 Republican-controlled House of Delegates when Richmond swears in early January.
And for those who are watching who are not familiar with the specific races, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the specific Republicans who have won their seats is Jason Ballard unseating Chris Hurst out west. Otto Waxman unseating Rosalind Tyler, and Kim Taylor unseating, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name because both in South Side. Tara Durant unseating Josh Cole, I believe just outside of Northern Virginia. And then I believe Tim Anderson unseating Democrat Nancy Guy, who I believe won by just like 28 votes or something like that 2 years ago.
Yes.
And the 2 of the parent winners that have not been called, I believe, are AC Cordoza and I'm blanking on the name here.
Aaron Greenhall, my friend.
Yes. Also, both of which are in Virginia Beach. So just to give like a rundown of the seats that appear to have gone Republicans' ways. It's really interesting that Glenn Youngkin was the one who had the coattails, because I think many of us were thinking at a certain point in this race that it was Jason Myers that was going to be the ticket leader, and yet he finished 3rd of the 3 Republicans running statewide.
Yeah, well, it became, that was the obviously the conventional wisdom when we really started to get into the general election, back in June. People thought that Jason Miyares now officially confirmed this afternoon as the Attorney General-elect in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Many thought that Miyares, just by the conventional wisdom, would do the best because he was the most experienced in the race. He was a man who he's been an elected delegate since 2015. He's had a history of running these races. He's had experience of running in modern racers, which neither Winsome Sears nor Glenn Youngkin had experience in that regard. And people thought that would help Miyares, but in the end, obviously, he did win out, but he did have to go against an incumbent in Mark Herring, who seems to have gotten that little bit of boost he needed, especially in his home county of Loudoun. He appears to have outperformed some of the Democratic numbers there compared to the rest of the slate. So that's really the big key, though, there. But Glenn Youngkin really kind of helping I wouldn't say drag, but helping get some of these Republicans across the line in some of these key and crucial House of Delegates districts, which I know not a whole lot of us, some of these, not a whole lot of us expected to switch.
Yeah, and for those of you who are watching, I brought up a map here because I think that a lot of people like to compare the results of last night to 2020 Biden versus Trump. I personally find that a little bit less interesting because I think almost across the entire Commonwealth, there was a Terry McAuliffe just collapsed, like not just in the rural areas, but also surprisingly in Loudoun County. I'm going to talk about the comparison to 2013 in a moment, but Loudoun County, I believe, was the story of the night last night, right?
Yes, it became pretty clear from the outset as we started to both get not only the election day results but also the absentee early vote that we were going. And that's not mail-ins. I just want to remind folks it's not mail-ins, but the absentee early in-person vote. That Loudoun County was going to be much closer than it had been in the past 5 years. It had been swung left heavily in the past couple of statewide election cycles, starting with 2016. Ralph Northam won it by a hefty margin in 2017, and then of course Tim Kaine, blew back Corey Stewart in this county, no surprise. And then both Daniel Gate and Donald Trump lost it by a pretty decent margin in 2020. But as you can see right there, Glenn Youngkin, we believe everything is in and Loudoun. Glenn Youngkin got that to almost 10 point, basically what was almost a 10-point margin in Loudoun, which was basically right where he needed to be to get a victory. Most people said he needed to be down about 11 points. He was obviously, as you can see, he was down by about 10 and a half points, which again really was the key factor in his victory tonight.
But what strikes me was, do you think that it was the specific issues? Because like everyone was talking about education. That was the big drive that drove Glenn Youngkin supporters to the polls. But in Loudoun County in particular, it was particularly salient because of local factors. Do you want to explain those, and do you think those may have had an impact specifically in Loudoun County?
Well, yes, there have been some salient issues locally for the Loudoun County School Board. Recently, it has become pretty clear that in the past month that the Loudoun County School Board seemingly covered up two incidents of sexual assault that turned into two incidents of rape that a student was convicted of recently of at least one count of rape. He did it in two different schools. He committed the act in one school, was moved to another, and then did it again. He has been convicted of one of those counts so far, with the court case for the second underway. So I do think that did help push some of those voters towards Glenn Youngkin here specifically. In Loudoun, that did have a bigger effect. I do think that was a part of the story. I don't think that's the full story, mind you, but I do think that's part of the story. Local factors always have some sort of influences on these type of races in some way. I do think the issues with the county school board were a key one here in Loudoun specifically, just because of how nationalized it got, because of how just, some of the issues they had, it's just kind of the key of what happened there. And,
right. Oops. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's just kind of what happened in the end. It's a surprising result. We were all pretty surprised on the stream that it came out like that. But this was a different time than what we've become to expect to be general from Loudoun in these statewide elections.
Right, but it's also not it's also not like surprising because Loudoun County has been in the past closer than a place like, say, Prince William County, which, as you can see here, was not as close.
Yeah, and I mean that turns down to Loudoun too. Loudoun's a considerably wider county, especially in its western portion, compared to both Prince William and Fairfax. While Prince William has a decent sized African American population, does have a decent sized Hispanic population as well. But we did see some trends in those Hispanic areas, as we've kind of seen across the country, towards Republicans. But the African American vote in Prince William is what kept it to those levels, while Fairfax is more heavily concentrated with African Americans and Asian voters, specifically in Fairfax, both of which aren't necessarily trending towards the Republican Party at as steady of rate as we've seen Hispanics. So Loudoun's key factors, it has a lot of different factors, like you said. It's not just where it is. It is a wider county. That western, as you circle right there, that western portion right there, that went heavily red. That turned back the clock specifically. It went heavily red in that portion of Loudoun. That's the wine. That is the wine country part of Loudoun. It is wealthy, but it is also significantly wider than most other parts of Northern Virginia, and it is not as trending Democratic as other parts of Northern Virginia. It is kind of in this purplish area still, like it used to be back in the late 2010s and early in the 2000s. It's not nearly as blue as the other eastern parts of the county have been.
I remember watching like Krasgrain, it's like going over all of these rural counties because I think what people will point out, at least that I've pointed out, is that this is the first time I believe that I can remember since the Republican has won statewide without winning Loudoun. I think it's first time since 1969, without winning Prince William since I think 1960. Without winning Fairfax since 2004, and without winning Henrico since I don't know when. Glenn Youngkin won while losing all of these places. So, but I think Kraz was pointing out how exactly he made up for it, way out here and around over here as well.
Yeah, well, we can't. First of all, let's talk about this. First of all, let's go to Southwest Virginia here. Southwest Virginia, which does have some, this used to be like West Virginia. The actual state where these are coal mining countries, but these used to be ancestrally, heavily, Democratic counties. But you go up into places like Wise County, where they used to be heavily Democrat. It went 84% for Glenn Youngkin. That's still a swing from Donald Trump. Well, you would think that wouldn't happen, but Glenn Youngkin got the margins that he needed to, plus 10, 11, or 12 points in these Southwest counties. Buchanan County, which is also in this part of here. If you can go to it, it's close. It's on the other side here. It's closer to Roanoke in that northern edge here, right next to Tazewell, I believe.
Find it eventually.
You're getting there. I think it passed right next to Giles, I believe, is right next to it. I believe that's it's in there. But anyway, Buchanan County is an ancestrally Democratic county that went heavy for Glenn Youngkin. Just this deep portion of red here in Southwest Virginia that really turned the corner here. Allegheny County, that's one.
This one stands out for me.
Yeah, that's one that went for Craig Deeds in 2009. And as you can see now, went for 75% towards Glenn Youngkin.
I think it was only Romney plus 3.
Yeah, this was not a heavy Democratic state, but we're also getting into now, you can get into this part here of the Shenandoah Valley. These big, heavy red counties here, not outside of Southwest Virginia, but kind of in this in-between area here between Northern Virginia and Southwest Virginia. You go up there, you see like Rockwell County up there, which it does hold the city of Harrisonburg, but you've got Augusta County, which, heavy red. It holds Staunton, which is a slightly blue college area, but that still swung heavily for Glenn Youngkin. You got Rockingham, has the city of Harrisonburg in it. Again, deep blue college town, but surrounding it, again, huge numbers in these valley towns that we did not expect. But I also want to point out something else here. If you can go down kind of in I'll call it the Bob Good section here of his parts here that are part of Virginia 05. You see around Campbell County, Amherst County, Nelson, Buckingham. His county includes Charlottesville and Albemarle counties, which are deep blue parts that usually keep this seat in recent times in the low double digits or in the high single digits. Glenn Youngkin won Bob Good seat. Calculations are showing by about 20 points.
Those Albemarle County numbers are not what Terry McAuliffe would have hoped for.
Yes. So I was going to go down here, as you see, Albemarle for sure. But if you go down into these more southern counties here in the Southwest here, Buckingham, you go into Campbell, go in some of these, Prince Edward, he lost Prince Edward. That was a flip from Joe Biden's. Campbell County showing up in huge droves to vote for Republicans. That's another aspect of this race where, just these rural counties showing up big. Pennsylvania, showing up in big numbers.
And here's one to talk about. This is a particularly surprising one.
Yeah, Montgomery County, which hosts Blacksburg, but I'm not as surprised about the swing in Montgomery as that you just were over at the swing in Radford City, which was a Biden +9 town. It basically just swung the entire opposite direction, becoming a Glenn Youngkin +9 and a couple of points city this year. That was the big surprise. And that was a huge factor in knocking out the incumbent Democrat from the 12th district that we mentioned earlier, Chris Hurst. All that is in his district, and that swing in Radford there really hurt his attempts at reelection.
And it wasn't just majority white parts like in Southside. It's also places like Brunswick County. I believe Biden won this area by double digits, maybe close to 60%. Look at that. Terry McAuliffe's winning by less than 5 points here.
Yep. Green, again, same in Greenville. You saw a big drop in Greenville. I think if you even go over Emporia, which is that little city inside there in Greenville, you were almost on it.
There we go.
That's a 10-point swing from that. I mean, an 18-point swing. That was a Biden plus 38 independent city. Here, it's only McAuliffe plus 20. That we saw that decrease in African-American turnout. And if you go over just a little bit, you go past Isle of Wight, you go to that blue county right next to Chesapeake, Suffolk, right? That Suffolk city, that was a Biden plus, 15, 17 and a half point district that ended up only being McAuliffe plus 14 and 4.5. That's a big margin switch. That's a lot of votes lost. And those lack of turnout down in this part of the state cannot be overlooked as to why Terry McAuliffe lost this race.
That brings me to an important point I want to say, because I think it's useful to actually compare this not to 2020 where McAuliffe just collapsed everywhere, but to 2013 where McAuliffe was winning statewide by almost as much, by pretty much as much as Glenn Youngkin was winning this time around. And you look at some of the results from from 2013. Look at that in Northern Virginia. Cuccinelli is keeping it much closer in almost all of Northern Virginia, including in Arlington, much closer than what Glenn Youngkin was able to get. Fauquier is an area where Youngkin did better, but Stafford, this was an area where Cuccinelli did better than Youngkin. Same thing, by the way, in the Richmond area, Chesterfield, Richmond. These numbers, I believe, are just about as well, or even better for Cuccinelli than they were for Youngkin. But you come down here and look at that. This was McAuliffe kept it closer than what he did this time. He did worse here. This was McAuliffe winning Chesapeake. He lost it this time. Suffolk, much better margins then than they were now. And this was true, as you can see, in Norfolk and Portsmouth, Hampton, Newport News, almost across the Hampton Roads region. The McAuliffe's margins went down, and I felt that was interesting because that was not the case in Richmond. It was not the case in Northern Virginia, but that's what happened in Hampton Roads. I'm just curious about what may have gone wrong for Democrats in the Hampton Roads region.
Well, I think a lot of that points to some of the issues that they had with their ticket. This was a very Northern Virginia heavy ticket here that they nominated for these seats. It was a very heavy Northern Virginia-based ticket. And they kind of struggled with that. The Republicans had a lot of connections that were nominated to the Virginia Beach area. Glenn Youngkin had spent a lot of his time there when he was growing up. Jason Miyares, of course, represented part of the area as a delegate. Winsome Sears is from the Hampton Roads area. That's a connection that Democrats lost this time around. They didn't have this time around, and that really kind of started to cost them. And everything that I heard was that honestly, Democratic attempts in Virginia Beach were pretty poor. They did not have the type of infrastructure down there that would have helped them maybe do a bit better down there, which could have led to a Terry McAuliffe win. There were a lot of complaints from Democrats about kind of the efforts that are made down in Virginia Beach that really it wasn't there like it had been in the past 5 years. So that's why you see that switch in Virginia Beach. That's why you see that flip in places like Chesapeake and Northampton County there on the islands there. That flip too. That was a Terry McAuliffe county in right there on the peninsula part, on the island part of it there, right Northampton there. County. That was a McAuliffe won in 2013. Glenn Youngkin wins it by 2 points this time around. So and it's a kind of it's the kind of the weird part of this area though. Still, you've got Southside. If you go back to that 2013 map, you saw places like Dinwiddie County, and those majority black districts, counties that we saw much darker blue. You see places like Dinwiddie, which is right above Greenville there, next to Petersburg. You go up a little bit more to the left. There we go. Dinwiddie, yeah, they're much closer, much closer. This time, Dinwiddie itself though was trended heavily to the right. It was almost was almost a Youngkin plus 25 district, and Dinwiddie shift led to a victory for Republicans in a state house seat in the 63rd. That was the majority maker. That was the 51st seat. Right now, it seems like the Republicans have got to get their majority. So there have been you can see the changes in Virginia that have happened. It's a much lighter red southwest and south side. It's a much lighter blue northern Virginia, but the changes are clearly there.
And do you want to brag to my 3 viewers, or I guess 6 on a good day, how many seats you got right?
Right now it looks like we got 96 out of the 100 seats right, which I'm pretty happy with for a first time go here in Virginia. The House of Delegates is hard to call. 2 of those misses were the upsets that most everyone missed. That would be the 63rd and the 91st. Most people missed those. We had those rated as likely D. Luckily, we had no safety upsets here. We were a little bit worried about Mike Mullen against Jordan Gray in the 93rd there for a little bit, but he pulled a close one out. So there were no safety flips on the night that went to Republicans. But both of those, the 63rd and the 91st, we had rated as likely D. We had those as unlikely Republican wins. But that never meant that they were impossible. That's something that we have to always, when we say likely, it doesn't mean they're impossible. We just think it's unlikely that those seats go the other way. But the probability is always there. And it happened in those 2 seats. That's what really that's what hit us there. And we also got the 83rd wrong, which we thought would stay with the Democrats. And we also got the 10th district wrong, which we actually thought would flip to Republicans, but stayed in Democratic hands by a small margin.
And I just want to say my own mea culpa. I was convinced throughout this entire race that Virginia was just too blue for Republicans to win now. And the polls were showing it, and the enthusiasm side was there, the anecdotes are there, and I just ignored it all. I thought the fundamentals were important. I thought that all it mattered was that it was a Biden plus 10 state, and Glenn Youngkin ran a local based issue. Like I think that many Republicans made the same mistake in 2019 with Kentucky, thinking that it was just too red a state for Democrats to win. And I think in both cases, they were wrong then. I was wrong this time, and now Virginia runs on Youngkin. Well,
yeah, it is definitely a new era going into 2021 now for Virginia, an era that I don't think many people even a year ago would have said was possible, but here we are.
Yeah. As a bit of a bonus, do you want to talk about judicial races in Pennsylvania, or should we end it here?
Oh, we'll go for 5 minutes. We'll take 5 minutes to talk about some judicial races in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So statewide races in Pennsylvania, as at least I expected, Republicans swept them. But you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Pennsylvania had some key judicial races that occurred this past election night, because remember, even though there's always some states that we always talk and focus on, there's elections everywhere. Every first Tuesday in November, there's elections everywhere here, and they're all important. We had a Supreme Court seat open up in Pennsylvania that was open. It wasn't just a retainment; it was an actual open seat that was held by a Republican who was retired. Republican has nominated Kevin Brobson, a superior court judge, to run for this, to nominate to the seat, and the Democrats nominated Maria McLaughlin for this seat. But it looked close going in. I saw the same mistake that happened in the primaries with those ballot measures, that people looked at the early votes that looked good for the Democratic supported side and said Pennsylvania is going to flip for the Democrats. And I had to tell people, hold your horses. There's a lot of other ballots to count. There's a lot of in-day to vote, especially from those rural areas. And it happened again, where Kevin Brobson is almost for sure won that Supreme Court seat. It keeps it at a 5-2 split on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Democrats still hold that 5-2 majority, but it makes sure it doesn't come to a supermajority now of 6-1. Republicans held on to that seat. And then they also held on to Brobson's Superior Court seat, winning that seat as well that night. And like you said, it was just a complete suite of judicial elections. They won 2 open seats on another lower court that were statewide elections. It's one of those weird ones where you pick one candidate, but it's technically two win. It's one of those weird races. And the 2 Republicans won in that court race as well. So it was a court-wide sweep for Republicans. Not necessarily something that was unexpected considering the atmosphere right now. We knew from the primaries it looked like Pennsylvania Republicans were much more enthused than Democrats in the state. That held up for this cycle. But that is a key keep though for Republicans this cycle. That is a key victory as they try and chip away at that Democratic advantage on the Supreme Court.
And as I was watching the initial results, I was like, if Democrats seriously lose Virginia but win Pennsylvania, that would not have been something I would have predicted.
Yeah, that would have been pretty surprising. But like I said, some of those early calls from people who were like, saw the early numbers and they were like, this is it. You can't do that with Pennsylvania. You can't do it when just the rurals are in Pennsylvania. You can't do it when just the cities are in Pennsylvania. There's always more to come because there's always more. And people forget we have some very big rural counties that do vote pretty heavily Republican in these races. Places like Lancaster and New York and other places like that, like such, that vote pretty heavily Republican in those races. So it's always something to remember with Pennsylvania. Never call. Try not to call Pennsylvania too early. You make sure you wait on it a little bit.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on, and amazing stream last night once again. And
thank you very much.
Wishing you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having with me today, Jonathan.